precinct. With that said, I will now welcome officers from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and welcome Ms Melanie Klein, Acting Managing Director and Chief Financial Officer. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Thank you. Yes, Chair, I do.
Please go ahead.
The ABC welcomes this opportunity to address the committee. I would like to share some information about the ABC's recent performance, as well as our plans for the upcoming federal election. Yesterday, we received the latest digital news rankings for January, and I'm pleased to report ABC News is again Australia's #1 digital news publisher. Our audience across the month was almost 12.5 million Australians. This is a great demonstration of how much the public values our service. This result reflects ABC coverage of major global news events, as well as coverage of domestic issues such as housing and the cost of living. Once again, the ABC was the sound of the sporting summer. Through our unparalleled broadcast network and on-demand audio, we provided access to the thrilling Australia versus India cricket test series and the Australian Open. The quality and breadth of our services means that across all broadcast and digital platforms, the ABC reaches around 80% of Australians each month. The ABC is also Australia's most trusted news provider. 79% of Australians aged 18 to 75 years say they trust or highly trust the information they are provided by the ABC. This is significantly higher than any other media and information providers. It is well known that the ABC provides a vital emergency broadcasting service. So far this financial year, we have covered more than 500 emergency events. In 1 week this month, we broadcast more than 76 hours of dedicated emergency radio programming on the North Queensland floods. A key focus for our coverage in coming weeks will be the next federal election. The ABC is ready to provide the necessary news, information and analysis voters need to make an informed choice. During the campaign, we will also be engaging with more Australians than in any previous election. As part of this, on Thursday, we are launching Your Vote, Your Say. This initiative harnesses our unmatched network of reporters and radio programs, based in more than 60 locations across remote, regional and metro Australia, to make sure people's voices are heard and their concerns are addressed. We will also soon announce the suite of interactive election tools that will help voters understand the issues that matter most to them, highlight the questions they want candidates to answer, and explore their concerns and hopes for Australia's future. Elections give all of us a say in the future of the country, and the ABC is ready to play its important role in supporting our democracy. Thank you, Chair. I now welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Ms Klein. We might start with Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to you all. Could I just firstly address the rationale for Mr Anderson, the Managing Director, not appearing today? I have received a copy of the letter that Mr Williams has provided to the committee, but it is disappointing he's not here. Can you just explain why he's gone on leave now, when obviously his tenure continues, I think, until the 10th of March?
Senator,
I will just put on the record that the committee is well aware that Mr Anderson was not coming. They were advised due to ill health. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, actually, I think he's on leave.
Yeah.
Sorry, my
yes,
apologies.
Chair.
He's on leave. I have the letter
Senator,
here. If you would like a copy, Senator Henderson.
I've got a copy.
Oh.
Mr Anderson's on a period of approved leave.
And can I just raise concerns about that, given he's still the Managing Director of the ABC?
That is noted, Senator.
So you're the Acting ABC Managing Director. Are you also the Acting Editor-in-Chief?
That would be correct, Senator, yes, during this period. Of course, Senator, working alongside my colleagues, Mr Stevens and Mr Fan.
So do they also have Editor-in-Chief responsibilities? I'm just...
The Acting Managing Director has the full responsibilities of the role, including Editor-in-Chief. That is correct.
So I just wanted to firstly ask you about the Latoof litigation. Could you provide the committee with an update on that dispute, which is obviously garnering a lot of headlines at the moment?
Yes, Senator. So the case is still before the courts. We have closing submissions Thursday and Friday of this week.
So can you please provide the committee with an update on this litigation?
Senator, that is the update I'm able to provide at this point in time. The case is still before the courts.
Are you able to provide an update on the legal fees spent by the ABC to date?
Yes, Senator. I am able to provide an update on that. In answering that question, I would like to highlight that the ABC has tried on multiple occasions to settle the matter on a commercial basis. This is without admission of liability. The ABC maintains that it did not terminate Ms Latouf's one-week casual contract unlawfully, but we do obviously understand that this is an impost on public funds, and that is why we have tried to attempt to settle the matter. So I just want to provide that context, and I can provide the amount spent today is $1.1 million.
And can you provide a breakdown as to that expenditure?
I don't have that in front of me, sorry, Senator.
Is that external legal costs? Does that include your own internal legal costs?
Senator, that would be external legal costs.
And does that include all of the counsel in relation to, who are appearing on behalf of the ABC in these proceedings?
Yes, Senator.
And what's the total estimated cost of this matter, do you believe, based on...
Senator, I'm not sure at this point in time.
The proceedings, you haven't done any forecasts?
Senator, I'm not sure at this point in time of the total estimated cost.
So what has the ABC learnt in relation to this dispute? And in asking that question, I also raised concerns about the ABC's apparent failure to properly do its due diligence before Ms Latouf was hired.
Senator, I don't think at this point in time it would be appropriate for me to go into detail in response to your question. The matter is still before the courts. We will, of course, be in a position post that, and once we have the judgment, to be able to talk at length in response to that question.
So there is some controversy that's arisen. The former ABC chair, Ms Buttrose, has made public her concerns about the testimony of Mr Anderson. What can you say about that matter?
Senator, I really can't say anything on that matter. I'm afraid I have no involvement, no details on that matter.
So Mr Anderson claims he spoke with Ms Buttrose about the dismissal at an ABC office before a lunch that they both attended. Ms Buttrose has produced a taxi receipt, and she's disputing Mr Anderson's version of events. This is obviously a pretty significant matter. Who is correct, Ms Klein?
Senator, I would not be able to comment at all on the different witness statements.
Could you provide information about Mr Anderson's diary, including on that day, please?
But Senator, I'd have to take that on notice and see what's available.
And are you able to provide any information about whether a meeting did take place at ABC offices before the lunch to which Ms Buttrose refers?
Again, Senator, I'd have to take that on notice.
Did anyone investigate or examine Ms Latouf's social media before she was hired?
Senator, I think these are matters that are being canvassed before the court at the moment. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment on those matters as they pertain to matters before the court.
So I appreciate that this matter is before the court. It is a civil proceeding, and I appreciate the position that you are in, Ms Klein, but I am asking quite a separate question in relation to the ordinary human resources functions of the ABC when you are hiring anyone. Can I please ask you again, did the ABC investigate Ms Latouf's social media and her activity and comments on social media? And as you might be aware, I've been very, very critical of the ABC's mismanagement of its social media policy over many years. Did that investigation occur at all?
Senator, again, I guess if I can take that in two ways. One, I do think, and I'm trying to be very careful, obviously, in what I say. I do think these matters were canvassed before the courts. I do believe that. If you're asking me personally, my knowledge, I was not involved in the hiring decisions. But I stress, I believe that was canvassed within the courtroom.
And so what's the normal process for the ABC when engaging any employee or whether of a permanent or temporary nature? Is there a proper due diligence conducted? Because I would put it to you that if there had been proper due diligence, the ABC may have decided not to hire Ms. Lattouf in the first place.
So, Senator, we do have extensive processes in recruitment. I might pass to Ms. Amarelli to talk to the process, if that's of assistance.
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the question. Our recruitment processes do have steps as a part of those processes in terms of reference checking through the application process, obviously interviewing, sometimes multiple rounds of interviews, depends on the role, the nature of the position, the seniority of the position. And so those processes would normally run through the people and culture function or the HR function and lead to a hiring outcome.
And you didn't mention any examination of a potential employee's social media. Does that also occur?
It is not always the case that we would examine a potential candidate's social media activity before hiring.
Isn't that a mistake?
I'm not sure that I would call it a mistake. I don't know that the human resource effort required to canvass individual social media profiles through the hiring process is something that we would look at including in our recruitment processes.
Well, in the context of news and information, you want to ensure that the person you're hiring has exhibited the highest standards of integrity in terms of their position on certain issues. So isn't that a fundamental obligation of the ABC, particularly when hiring someone who is conveying news and information? And of course, as you are well aware, Section 8 of the Act makes it a requirement of the board to ensure that all information is disseminated impartially and objectively.
Through reference checking and through interview process, that is where we are able to engage with candidates around their suitability for a role. It is not a part of the process that we would usually go and examine social media activity for each individual candidate.
And Ms Klein, is this something that you have looked at and are reviewing as a result of the revelations that we're now hearing, that you don't investigate someone's social media activity when before you hire them?
Senator, I think going back to, I think it was one of your first questions, will we learn lessons? Will we reflect? We absolutely will reflect on this matter. We do reflect on this matter. So it's not something that I can say in detail exactly what we will do as a result of this matter. Separate to that, and I understand we have canvassed personal use of social media on a number of occasions. Our position remains that we have a code of conduct policy, we have guidelines that underpin that policy. We do not take it upon ourselves to review each and every member of every member of staff or potential members' social media.
So I would say, and I've just made that same comment, that has proved to be a very big mistake, because isn't it incumbent on the ABC to ensure that you are not hiring an activist or someone who's expressed particular views which might be contrary to your code or which might fall foul of your obligations under the ABC Act?
Senator, I answer the question in the same manner. There are certain issues I think that you're raising that we're engaging with in a current court proceeding. I can't answer things as they pertain to that current court proceeding. We have our personal use of social media guidelines. We always look to refine and improve, and we have our recruitment processes and we have our recruitment policies. We always look to refine and improve.
just want to raise a concern about the competence of your lawyers. Mr Anderson, during the proceedings, was asked to comment in relation to evidence he gave during Senate estimates, which is privileged, and yet your lawyers did not raise objections. Why not? Are you able to provide the committee with any information about that?
Senator, I would not be able to respond to the lawyer's actions at a certain point in time in the case, but I'm happy to take that on notice.
Well, we've raised a range of concerns about ABC lawyers in recent hearings, and I do want to raise another matter. Chair, I do want to go into another issue. Is that an appropriate time to share the call?
That would be,
Yeah,
that would be
thanks.
great. Thank you, Senator Henderson.
Thanks, Chair.
We'll go to Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Ms Klein, I think, firstly, surely ABC management can see that this whole affair has been handled badly and has resulted in quite a messy legal process, quite a messy public debate about the ABC. I just want to understand that at a management level, this has been handled poorly, hasn't it?
Senator, I wouldn't agree that at a management level this has been handled poorly. I think there are many facets and many elements, as I have already stated. I think we are and will continue to reflect on this matter, and we will learn what we can. I want to be clear. We're still in court. The process is still before the courts. We defend our position that we did not unlawfully terminate a casual contract, and we'll wait to see how this unfolds, and we will continue to reflect and learn.
The bigger problem for the rest of the broadcaster, though, is questions of integrity, questions of independence, questions of respect for staff. I mean, journalists themselves are indeed entitled to opinions, aren't they?
Yes, Senator. Yes.
So, I mean, the demanding from some that somehow Antoinette Lattouf should be held up as a warning sign for others who work at the public broadcaster, who dare to speak facts, who dare to have opinion. I mean, that's the last thing we want from an independent, fearless, trustworthy broadcaster, isn't it?
Senator, I don't think the ABC is taking that position with regard to Ms Lattouf.
Could I ask, I understand there's a number of, I think we all have, or a number of us have a lot of questions about this incident and how it's been managed, but I get the difficulty of it being before the court. So I'm going to try and keep my questions to areas where I do think you can answer. In some of the reporting and, of course, in some of the evidence given in relation to how this unfolded, it was said that Chris Oliver Taylor said that he was getting ahead of the story in relation to dealing with Lattouf, Ms Lattouf. What is the ABC's understanding of what getting ahead of the story meant?
Senator, again, the specific evidence, as I understand it, that Mr Oliver Taylor has provided in an ongoing matter, I just feel it's not appropriate for me to comment on that.
All right. We've had many exchanges in this Senate estimates session about the ABC having to respond and deal with criticism and attacks from the Murdoch press. particularly the Australian, but it's broader than that, but let's not beat around the bush. The Australian leads the charge on attacking the public broadcaster and the people who work there. When an attack happens, when the Australian newspaper decides to go after one of your staff, one of your journalists, what do you do? What's the first thing the organisation does?
Senator, there's a range of actions and protections we have in place for our staff. I think, firstly, I'd say we understand as employees of the public broadcaster the obligations we have, and we garner a lot of feedback, positive and negative, and we accept that is part of doing our job, and it makes us better. That's the truth of it. It makes us do our job better. When it comes to particular matters, I mean, it's really on a case-by-case basis, and we have processes from people and culture point of view that support our staff, and we also have managers that do their role in welfare checks and in supporting our staff. So it would be something we take on a case-by-case matter, and we've got, as I say, I repeat myself, we've got very strong people and culture processes in support of the welfare of our staff.
And what about dealing with the fallout for the organisation? The reason I'm asking this is because of this phrase, getting ahead of the story. Getting ahead of the story was a reference to getting ahead of the story before the Australian newspaper tore shreds off Ms Lattouf, as they do to other journalists who work at our public broadcaster. They have done it consistently, they continue to do it, they take glee and pride in it.
Senator, I truly don't know what Mr Oliver Taylor was trying to convey by his words.
Okay. In relation to the JANIC review, number 4 of the recommendations is that the ABC improve its responses to public attacks. What steps have been taken internally by the organisation in relation to that reference?
Senator, I'll pass to Ms Amarelli on that one.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question, Senator. We're continuing to work through the recommendations of the Listen Loudly, Act Strongly review by Dr Janke, which was delivered last year. On that particular recommendation, we have an existing wellbeing team, and as a part of that team, we've got support for social media. We have a social media advisor who provides training to staff on social media on protecting themselves online against bullying and trolling. That team works closely into the divisions with news and content to support staff. We are looking at how we continue to grow our support for staff in response to those attacks, and we've got staff embedded in the different divisions to continue to do that. It's an ongoing challenge, as you know, and as you're pointing out, and it is difficult, but it is something that we're very alive to. We participate, for example, just a couple of weeks ago there was a Safer Internet Day, and we conducted a panel where we had experts from across the organisation come and talk to experiences online and how to manage that. So it really is a live discussion, and we continue to put support around that. Okay.
And what about on an organisational level or an editorial level, beyond the individual staff member? And when the ABC is under attack from the Murdoch press, that impacts your journalists doing their daily work. Up here in the gallery, if the ABC is being pulled to bits by, Rupert Murdoch's favourite rag, how do you deal with it as an organisation, not just as an individual staff, the welfare of individual staff? I'm trying to understand, how do you stand up for yourselves and for the integrity of the public broadcaster?
So, Again, Senator, apologise for repeating myself. We take feedback from many sources, positive and negative, on a daily basis. We respond in different ways, so we can have, you may have seen our chair's statement quite recently, where we put on the record, corrected the record, achievements of the ABC, corrected statements, for example, that are relatively innocuous, I mean, in all honesty, but that a presenter was in Paris who just did not happen to be in Paris. So there are a range of things that we do to correct the record or to improve, I guess, the public discourse, the understanding of what the ABC does, the value of the ABC. We then there are a range of, individual responses to individual circumstances with our journalists. Mr. Stevens, you might be able to talk to a few of those circumstances.
Yeah, I can speak generally, Senator, to our approach in the news division, and I can confirm that News Limited do have a strange obsession with sort of taking scrutiny beyond scrutiny and sort of regularly agitating against the work of our journalists. We're flattered with their interest, but despite their very small readership, we do engage and respond to a lot of their queries quite regularly. And we do defend the work of our journalists almost every week. There's multiple queries a week. Having said that, as a public broadcaster, we must be subjected to scrutiny, and we must have a culture of accepting scrutiny and self-reflect where we get things wrong and be transparent about that. So I think it's balancing all of those things, but defending the work of our journalists and the work that our presenters and journalists do generally, as junior as they are, or as well high profile as they are, is very important. And through that, if a legitimate concern has been raised about their work or conduct, we also have a look at that and work through what has occurred. But I must say that by and large, the queries being raised are disproportionate to the issues that are being realised.
Mm-hmm. We'll need to rotate the call if you have one final question.
Just on this particular topic, has there been any response from management to staff morale at the ABC since the court case has been in trial?
Senator, I guess we can take that question in a range of directions. I mean, we have numerous conversations on a one-on-one basis with our staff. I think, it can depend where you work without diminishing any aspect of this, but it can depend where you work in the ABC.
Of course.
As to the impact it does have on our staff. I mean, our staff on balance are, amazingly resilient, as Mr. Stevens noted. There's a high level of criticism that can come our way. They're a resilient group of people. We have responded, again, contextually on a case-by-case basis as required, and Ms Amarelli personally, in fact, has responded to specific concerns in email correspondence to the whole organisation. So we are, I guess one way of putting it, we are very alive to the issue.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I've obviously got lots of other questions.
We'll just keep rotating.
Yeah.
Senator Darmody.
Thank you. I want to talk about Australia Day coverage of this year. So specifically, I'm not sure if you've seen, there was an article in The Australian dated the 26th of January entitled "Macintosh Takes Aim at ABC for Focusing on Divisive Protests Over Australia Day," where Melissa McIntosh, the Shadow Minister for Communications, criticises the ABC for its Australia Day coverage. I was wondering if you could, for the benefit of the committee, provide an overview of the ABC's coverage of Australia Day this year.
Certainly. So I might start with a few sort of comments, and then I will pass to Mr. Stevens. So I guess I'll start by saying, you know, we completely recognise there is a divergence of views in the Australian community around Australia Day. In our news coverage, we reflect the diversity of views in our community. It's what the ABC Act requires, it's what our editorial policies require. But there's no doubt that the ABC recognises Australia as our national day, and no other media organisation, I would say, comes close to the sort of broad coverage that we provide in screen. And so I've just got a long list, so I'll just say a few things, but I will pass to Mr. Stevens. We do the Australia Day live coverage. We have the Governor-General's Australia Day message, the National Citizenship Ceremony, Australian of the Year. We have extensive coverage online. We have audio coverage across RN, for example. We had Big Ideas, Saturday Extra, Revision, The Science Show, the Australia Day Weekend Special. So there is a long and extensive list of coverage. Mr. Stevens, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, we can, Senator, provide on notice a collection of the full gamut of coverage that we did. Just as a small example, if you take, for instance, our 7 p.m. bulletins that night, we covered an array of stories and events in regards to Australia Day. So I know that, for example, in Melbourne, on 7 p.m. of the night of Australia Day, they led with a piece about the Australians of the Year, which is obviously a significant moment. I know that most bulletins ran a package which captured some of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander events that took place, including the Invasion Day March as a separate item. There was a really strong story about Citizen Day ceremonies, citizenship and community events associated with that. And then there was an extensive package which looked at Australia Day honours, and in each state they would have done specific packages related to people in their state or territory that got honours on the honours list. So that's just on 7 p.m. alone. Of course, across all of our platforms, the coverage was quite vast, and as Ms. Klein referred to, you know, it's incumbent on us to reflect the full gamut of perspectives across Australia in moments like this, and we did that quite effectively.
Thank you. So you just talked about the 7 p.m. news, and the Shadow Minister's assertion that there was not one story about Australia Day on 7 p.m. news that night clearly sounds like it was incorrect, given what you've just
what we can do
outlined.
Is we can take on notice and collect all of the different rundowns for 7 p.m. I'm not sure which state or territory the senator was in that night. Obviously, there's specific local elements per bulletin, so we can collect that. And also, we have to remember that 7 p.m. reaches a large chunk of our audience, but a lot of Australians access our news and information in a whole host of other ways now, on our website and through radio and social media.
Thanks. That would be good if you could provide that. How does the ABC achieve balance overall in its reporting of events like this?
I can talk to our approach on that specific day, but Mr. Fang, our Editorial Director, can talk more broadly to the organisation at large for non-news events. So how about you speak to the broader approach as it applies to EdPulse?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. So, as has been pointed out by my colleagues, diversity of perspectives over a reasonable amount of time is a key part of our editorial policies. So we don't speak to balance as such, but rather capturing the relevant and the perspectives across the community on all of our news and current affairs coverage, including Australia Day. So on a day like Australia Day, there are a whole raft of different perspectives on the day that we would expect to be covered, not just in our news output, but also across audio, our talkback radio programs, digital, etc. And so really what we're looking to do there is canvass all those relevant perspectives in the Australian community so that Australians can hear about those things, can make up their own minds about how they feel about that particular day. Because there are so many events and things going on, that does mean that there is a comprehensive coverage, as has been pointed out. But yeah, it is about a diversity of relevant perspectives over time.
Who determines what's relevant?
So when you're thinking about relevance, it's what is impactful in the community. It is what is clearly views that are being expressed by parts of the community. It is essentially on something like Australia Day, it is views that would run right across the whole of our community, except for views that would be considered to be non-representative or fringe views.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Look, just on that last question in relation to the Shadow Minister for Communication, I'm just keen to have that article tabled. McIntosh takes aim at ABC for focusing on divisive protests over Australia Day. And Mr Stevens, just to clarify, my understanding is that the Shadow Minister was raising concerns about the ABC's coverage because, in her view, there was a story about Invasion Day on this particular night that she refers, but not Australia Day.
So, thanks, Senator. I don't want to make assumptions about what coverage the Senator was viewing or observing, but what I can assure you is that almost half the 7 p.m. bulletin that night in Sydney and Melbourne, at least, and possibly Queensland, covered around 4 to 5 different major events or issues as it related to Australia Day, and one of those included a piece about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. And had the ABC not covered those perspectives on that day, it would have been not accurate as to the disparate perspectives and communities we're obligated to reflect on major events like that.
Yeah, my understanding was it wasn't in relation to actual Australia Day, the 26th.
Right.
I think this broadcast occurred preceding Australia Day, and the Shadow Minister's proper concern was that there was a report about the Invasion Day rallies, but there was no
on the 25th,
reference,
not the 26th.
Yeah, there was no reference to Australia Day. It just seemed to be very, very skewed.
Okay, we can have a look at the 25th of January as well. I think, irrespective of the day, covering that perspective is still absolutely legitimate and defensible.
Well, I just want to raise a broader point, because often when I have raised concerns about appropriate impartiality and balance in the ABC's reporting, the ABC will say, oh no, but we did another story on another day. Isn't it incumbent on every journalist to ensure that every report is balanced and impartial in accordance with their obligations under the ABC Act?
Yeah, certainly it's incumbent on journalists to make sure their journalism is accurate and impartial. That's beyond doubt. What the nuance there, of course, is the nature of what is included by differing perspectives and discussion and debate in an individual item will depend on the nature of the debate and or gravity of what's being discussed, and that will vary item to item.
But aren't your journalists required to report without fear or favour, impartially and accurately in every story they do?
Correct.
And so I would put to you that the defence that the ABC often puts forward, oh well, and I'm referring to the ABC's coverage of a particular pro-Palestinian march where a terrorist leader was reflected upon in very positive terms, and then the ABC said, well, but you must look at our other coverage. My concern is that the ABC is not sufficiently requiring its journalists to ensure that every report is accurate and impartial.
Senator, I think I can help here if I may. Our impartiality and diversity of perspectives standard in our editorial policies speaks about due impartiality. So that means what is reasonable, what's appropriate for the platform and the story at any given time. So what you're referring to is, each particular story. We don't speak about balance in every particular story. We speak about diversity of relevant perspectives over reasonable time, thinking about the audience consumption of that material.
I'm concerned about your statutory obligation to disseminate news and information impartially and objectively. You can't pick and choose. That is a requirement under the legislation which governs the ABC.
I understand that, Senator. What I'm just referencing is that the recognised standards of objective journalism that are set out in the Ed polls recognise due impartiality, which means that on every particular item, You cannot include all perspectives that might exist in the community. What you want to be including is the relevant ones for that particular story.
Mr. Stevens, in your last appearance, I asked whether you had instructed ABC lawyers in the Heston Russell case. You took that on notice, which was very surprising. You would clearly know the answer, and I'm asking you again. Did you instruct the lawyers in any respect on the Heston Russell case?
I think in regards to the question, Senator, as I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what we expressed was different members and members of management at the ABC provided legal direction or was in contact with the ABC legal department. I had thought that was a question on notice which we did respond to.
Can I ask you, for the record, did you instruct the lawyers at all in relation to the Heston Russell case?
So in regards to the defamation proceedings themselves, at different points in time, of course, I was consulted on different aspects of the case. To go to the specifics of what was discussed obviously relates to the ABC's legal advice at the time. I'm struggling to understand what the revelation is that I was aware of legal advice or in discussions with the ABC legal department during the trial.
Senator,
I'm not, Mr. Stevens, you're confusing what I'm asking. You would not answer the question when I last asked this of you. You said you'd need to take it on notice. I found it very surprising that you wouldn't know that. Sorry, Ms Klein, just let me finish this. That you wouldn't know that answer. And therefore what I'm asking for is clearly, did you instruct the lawyers in the defamation proceedings concerning Mr Russell? And you're now telling me that yes, you did. Is that correct?
Senator, if it's helpful, sorry, and I understand the questions from Mr Stevens, but just if it's helpful that I reference, we have provided an answer to that question. If it's helpful, it's question on notice 1278, which actually does indicate that, yes, Mr Stevens was a part of the team. Sorry, I'm just getting receipt of the question now, if it's helpful.
I would like to continue. Thank you, Ms Klein, but I just would like to continue my questions in relation to this matter.
Senator Henderson, I wonder, and will afford you the additional time, if we could actually hear what that response was, because I'm not recalling it myself.
Thank you, Chair. So the response we provided was, over the course of the Heston Russell defamation trial, ABC Legal was instructed from a number of departments across the news division, including the investigative journalism and current affairs team, the digital and national news team, and news management.
Thanks, Ms Klein. So you didn't address my question. My question was, did Mr Stevens instruct ABC lawyers in relation to the Heston Russell case? Now, in the question, now Mr Stevens is confirming for the first time that you did. Could you please explain the extent to which you provided the instructions, Mr Stevens, and did ABC lawyers at any time tell you that they had been put on notice in relation to the fake gunshots?
So in regards to the second question, the first I became aware, and I would like to, I assume you're referencing the legal correspondence between Mr Russell's lawyers and the ABC in November 2023 and then subsequently in April 2024. I was not privy to either of those pieces of correspondence, nor was anyone in news until the subsequent allegations were raised by the Spotlight program in Channel 7 in September of last year.
Sorry. I'm not trying to jump in. I just wanted to correct that. That was November 2022, I believe. It was in April 2023.
Okay, I'm getting the years mixed up.
Yeah.
But the November of that year, which is the letter which has been widely publicised and assessed by Mr Sunderland in his interim report. So, no, the contents of those letters were not given to me. I was not made aware of there being concerns about the editing of the videos that were subsequently investigated by Mr Sunderland until Spotlight raised them. And at the point they raised them, we moved very quickly to immediately look at them, and you would note we removed them immediately as well.
I mean, Mr. Stevens, from your perspective, and Ms. Klein, that is an astonishing failure by your lawyers.
Well,
I mean, that has absolutely compromised the integrity of ABC News and Current Affairs if you were not put on notice about that matter. And I would put to you that you should have been on notice because these matters were then canvassed during the trial. But it is shocking that ABC lawyers failed to inform your division and I assume management about these matters, given they were raised and given that the ability of the ABC to correct the record in relation to incorrect reports is so paramount to the trust that Australians hold in the ABC. Have there been consequences because of these failings by ABC Legal?
Senator, it's detailed in Mr. Sunderland's report. And I think Mr. Sunderland has spoken to a number of people in relation to this matter. I don't think any of us deny that it would have been preferable, and I appreciate that is a very soft word, that the letter was passed to Mr. Stevens and to the News Division. It was an error. It was an error by the team. There was no intent behind it. And you'll note in the report, Mr. Sunderland, Mr. Sunderland notes appropriately that he is not in a position to breach the ABC, to talk to our, he talks to our editorial policies. It is clear that he sees an issue from a corrections and a clarifications point of view, and we have accepted that, and we would agree with that.
I mean, as I say, it is completely astonishing, and I go back to my question. What are the consequences for people responsible, employed in the ABC Legal Department, for failing to pass on such critical information which would have enabled ABC News and Current Affairs to quickly reassess its position on the case and to correct the record straight away?
Senator, the actions we are taking now is to adopt the recommendations from Mr. Sunderland's review. There are 7 recommendations. We will adopt them. We will implement them as a leadership team. We have taken note of them. Mr. Fang has carried in many ways of the implementation of those, and Mr. Fang, I'm sure, would be happy to talk through that in detail. They're the actions that we are taking.
Well, I'm not asking about those recommendations. I'm asking about a bigger issue, and it's about managing the ABC. And I just raised another issue about, and I don't know who was responsible, which particular lawyer, but there was clearly some incompetence in the Ms. Latouf trial proceedings because the lawyers didn't seem to understand that evidence given in Senate estimates is privileged and cannot be used in a court. And we've seen what appears to be gross negligence or incompetence by ABC lawyers. And it just seems inexcusable, Ms. Klein, that ABC management is not taking action in relation to these very significant shortcomings.
Senator, I wouldn't agree that we're not taking action.
Right, well, what action are you taking then? That's what I'm asking you. Has there been any decisions made in relation to personnel such that those people who made those mistakes are no longer working at the ABC? Or do they still have your full trust and confidence?
Senator, I do not think it would be appropriate for me to go into detail or to name the legal team that were involved. It was an error. It was an accepted error. They accept the error. There has... we're talking about November 2022. Not all lawyers who are in the team at that point in time are still with the team. That is not me intending to say that there has been any action. There has not been any specific action taken against any of the lawyers that were involved in that process in November 2022. We have steps in place now. These are the recommendations of Mr. Sunderland. The leadership team is working assiduously to implement those recommendations. You'll see there is one step. I think it is recommendation number 7, and it states, steps should be taken to ensure adequate staff and resources are available to deal with complex and demanding legal matters. We're taking this very seriously and we are implementing the recommendations.
Can I ask whether the ABC is going to unequivocally apologise to Mr Russell?
Senator, the ABC has apologised to Mr Russell.
Only in a very conditional and limited way. Mr Russell is seeking a public apology from Mr Anderson on behalf of the ABC for the way in which he was portrayed, for the egregious way in which he was falsely portrayed as a war criminal. Will you apologise unequivocally to Mr Russell?
Senator, the ABC has apologised to Mr Russell.
No, it's been only very limited. It's a very conditional apology. You only apologised to Mr Heston Russell and other members of the second commando, and I'm reading from Mr Anderson's statement, for the impact of these shortcomings, which relates to the fake gunshots being edited into the video. The ABC has never apologised to Mr Russell for calling him a war criminal, for dragging him through the ringer. You've never apologised, so I'm asking you now, are you going to apologise? And will you apologise now?
Senator, my position is, as I have said, the ABC has apologised. We have issued an apology within the opening statement at Senate estimates on November 5 last year. On November 7, Mr Stevens issued an apology. There have been some other correspondence along the way, and then I refer to Mr Anderson's public statement on the 7th of February, where he also apologises directly to Mr Russell.
Well, I would put to you that that is not sufficient, and the apology was very much framed within the context of the false gunshots edited into the vision, and not to the broader issues, which is the basis on which Mr Heston Russell took defamation proceedings in the federal court.
And we'll rotate
Thanks, Chair.
the call, and we will go to Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Does the ABC believe that Lebanese people exist?
Senator, I take that question to be a question of, does the ABC deny the existence of race? I understand that was something that was canvassed, came to light, I'm not sure of the correct terminology, during the Lattouf matter. My response would be the ABC does not deny the existence of race. In fact, Ms Amarelli, who is by my side here, has clarified that in an email in an all-staff communication.
That was not my question. That was not my question. I thought Ms Klein had finished.
Senator Faruqi, please do not speak over the witnesses and do not speak over me. Please continue with your questioning.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to note that I'm happy to provide the contents of the email from Ms Amarelli, but to answer the question, the ABC does not deny the existence of race.
Ms Klein, that was not my question. My question was pretty straightforward, and it is actually not a complex question as your legal argument case purports. Does the ABC believe that Lebanese people exist?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Does the ABC believe that Arab people exist?
Yes, Senator.
Does the ABC believe that Middle Eastern people exist?
Yes, Senator.
So then why was it part of ABC's legal argument to question the existence of Lebanese, Arab, and Middle Eastern race? And why did Mr. Anderson state in court that he hadn't formed a view on whether there is a Lebanese race?
Senator, I think again, and I will read from Ms Amarelli's email because it provided good context. It was an email that was sent to all staff to provide clarity on this matter. I believe the email did make its way onto the public record. And I think I will quote Ms Amarelli, who is sitting next to me, but for assistance, and then we'll pass to Ms Amarelli if that's helpful. Ms Amarelli wrote, "The ABC has only raised the issue that in these proceedings the legal onus lies with Ms Lattouf to establish her claim about race."
Ms Klein, you did, since then the ABC has retracted that argument in court after huge community backlash. So you do understand that this has harmed and hurt many communities that are racially marginalized in this country, I hope. I mean, we all know that ABC has a racism problem. That was pretty much there in Dr. Janki's review, where 120 staff, including current and former ABC staff, said that racism was systemic in the ABC.
Senator, if I may, I don't believe it is a fair and reasonable statement to say, at a broad brush, the ABC is a racist organisation. We absolutely have acknowledged, particularly through the Janki review, and we are incredibly grateful for the people who came forward during that review. It's not an easy thing to come forward by any stretch of the imagination. And I just would like to make that statement. I also acknowledge what you're saying around distress in some sections of the community and our workforce. And again, if I can refer you quite specifically to an email from Ms Amarelli, also I believe now on the public record, and I will quote from this again, "The ABC recognises that regrettably this legal argument has caused distress in some sections of the community and our workforce. This was not the ABC's intention. Today the ABC has made clear to the court that it does not dispute or contest Ms Lattouf's race or national extraction, being Lebanese, Middle Eastern or Arab."
I guess what I'm saying is that ABC has a racism problem, because Dr. Janki's review made it clear that racism is systemic at the ABC. So I think a few of you have said to a number of questions today that the ABC is reflecting on certain things.
That is right.
So I would like to ask, will you reflect on this decision to take this argument to court, a pretty atrocious argument about the existence of certain communities and races? Will you review this system at the ABC that has allowed this blatant racism to take place? Will you also reflect on that?
I think, Senator, we have reflected on it, which is evidenced by the fact that Ms Amarelli wrote an email that showed that reflection and, you know, was very, very clear again. I think in the language, the ABC recognises regrettably we have reflected and we have issued some correspondence that demonstrates that reflection.
The problem is that it happened after so many reviews into racism at the ABC, and the community has called it surreal and blatantly racist. The ABC, in terms of Dr. Janki's review, when systemic racism was found at the ABC, there was a recommendation that the ABC commit to being proactively anti-racist. Now, do you think the comments or this legal argument was proactively anti-racist, or the comments from Mr. Anderson were proactively anti-racist?
Senator, I think they're two very, very different things that you're talking about. I'm happy to pass to Ms Amarelli to talk to the recommendations of the Janki review and what we're doing to implement the recommendations of the Janki review, if that's of assistance.
It's just one particular recommendation I'm referring to, which is that ABC commit to being proactively anti-racist. Questioning people's race, is that proactively anti-racist? It's the exact antithesis of being proactively anti-racist. It is actually racist.
I understand the comment, Senator, and it was a technical legal argument that we accept should never have been made, and we withdrew the argument before the ABC opened its case, but I appreciate the sentiment throughout sections of the community and our workforce, which we absolutely heard, and we regret that the decision to run that argument was made and accept that it should not have been made. If I may speak just on the recommendation in the review regarding anti-racism in particular, we are having many active discussions internally about that at the moment. We have partnered with the Australian Human Rights Commission and are rolling out anti-racism training, which is compulsory for all of our staff, including the executive leadership team and the board. That is currently underway. That is the first part of an anti-racism campaign, which we are also currently rolling out. We recognise that at the moment it feels difficult to reconcile some of what is being said with what has played out over the last month. But it is why we withdrew that argument and accept it should never have been made in the first place.
So the argument was withdrawn and you regretted that it shouldn't have taken place. Have you actually apologised to all your staff who are people of colour and First Nations and acknowledged that this would have hurt and harmed them? Has there been an apology issued to all the staff and the community by the ABC?
We have not done that as yet, but we do apologise for the distress that was caused. And as Ms Klein read out in terms of the all-staff communication I sent, it was the intention to do that, to recognise that people were hurt. I think Senator Hanson-Young asked before about understanding how staff are feeling at the moment. I have had many emails from staff. I have almost responded to all of them. I have a few more there, but I have been in direct contact with many staff who've expressed their disappointment at what has occurred over the last month. I have met with many teams across the organisation. I've met with our News Diversity Action Group. I've met with the extended leadership team in the Division of News and have listened and understood how people are feeling about this. The leadership team accepts that what has played out in public over the last month has had a very real impact on our staff, and we have work to do once we're able to talk more openly about this matter, once it is the court proceedings are finalised, in order to really address some of these things.
So just to clarify, you are going to apologise to staff for causing this hurt and harm, and also to the public? Is the ABC going to commit to apologising to the staff and apologising to the public? Because there are many people in the community as well who have been hurt and harmed by this.
Yes.
So you will publicly apologise?
We regret that that argument was made. It should never have been made, and we will apologise.
Thank you very much.
We need to rotate the call.
Sure.
We'll go to Senator Billick.
Thank you. There was an article recently in the Daily Telegraph, which I'm sure you're aware of. It was entitled "ABC Cost Aussies More Than a Netflix Subscription." In that article, a number of assertions about the cost of the ABC, the reach of the ABC and ABC spending were made. Now, the Chair issued a statement in response stating the article contained inaccuracies. For the benefit of the committee, could you outline to us what you consider to be the key inaccuracies in the article, and could you please provide the facts in relation to the cost and, firstly, the cost and audience reach of the ABC?
Certainly, thank you, Senator. So I think on balance there were many errors from our perspective that in the article, and the chair's response I think was quite clear. I think I'll start with the manner in which the calculation was done on the Netflix subscription. I believe it was a subscription that was ad supported, not a free subscription. Of course, the ABC is free to all Australians. So I think the starting point for the calculation was it was an error in and of itself. I think then the key point to raise is that it's impossible to do a comparison between Netflix and the ABC and what the ABC does, where the ABC is, the broad reach of the ABC, our infrastructure to support all Australians. I think some of the key points we highlighted in the statement, and I will highlight here, of course, is our emergency broadcasting services. So I think, as I said in my opening statement, we have covered more than 500 emergency events this financial year alone. And I think what's really important to stress when we talk about emergency broadcasting, we often talk about an emergency broadcasting team who are an amazing team, a very little team, the truth be told, that keep us across all of these, all of the events, but then they are supported by a workforce that can only exist in an organisation like ours because of how far-reaching we are and our infrastructure and our presence across all of Australia. So to actually have that presence, you can't compare that to what Netflix have and do, and it's not a criticism of Netflix at all. We've got 24-hour news, continuous 24-hour news. That's on the news channel, that's on news radio, that's on the ABC News web and app. That isn't a service that Netflix provide, nor should they. I think I've mentioned we've got our services are across 67 locations across the country. Again, as that sort of relates to emergency broadcasting, it's critical, but then just connecting with communities. Actually having a local service for our communities across Australia is a responsibility that we take very, very seriously, and a responsibility that I think sits wholly and solely with the ABC, often in isolation. Again, no comparison to a Netflix service. We've got international bureaus in 10 locations. We've got dedicated Pacific reporters. We've got a long list. We've got international services that make ABC storytelling available on TV, radio and online worldwide, with a focus on our region. In fact, we've got a monthly viewership across the Asia Pacific of at least 10.5 million people, and it's carried by more than 100 broadcast partners. We've got the most watched kids content, specialist educational content aligned to the curriculum. We've got dedicated news content for young people like Behind the News and BTN High. We have high quality locally made Australian drama. I mean, I could go on, but it's an incredibly long list. And then if I can just also correct a few of the statements around our audience and our audience performance, I think there was a lot missed in the interpretation provided in that article, and a lot of the key facts are in our annual report. We say them as often as we can. The ABC network was the #1 ranked television broadcaster in 23-24 with a reach of 36.4% or 6.6 million people across the 5-city metro population. As I said in the opening statement, we were #1 again in digital news for January, and that's repeat performance for us. We've got news stories in podcast rankers. We've been the #1 news podcast. We've had the #1 news podcast on many occasions. I could go on and on and on. ABC iView was the #1 ranked BVOD service in 23-24 based on on-demand minutes, with a 34% share of on-demand minutes across the year. ABC Radio reached an estimated 4.77 million people each week in the 5 capital cities. So we have a lot of facts, a lot of data. I'm prepared. We'd be more than happy to provide as much as helps anybody on notice. But I think in summary, I will say again, we disagree with the statements that were made.
That list of long activities that you've mentioned, let alone the ones you haven't mentioned, they're all part of your statutory role at the ABC, aren't they?
That is correct.
That's in there.
Please do table them.
Yes, please do. That'll be great. The article also cited a number of examples of what it asserts to be wasteful spending, such as the new ABC Parramatta offices and studios, which I understood was self-funded, but I could be wrong. I'm happy to be corrected. Commentary for the Paris Olympics and fact-checking services, amongst other things. So, once again, for the benefit of the committee, could you please outline the ABC's response to the key assertions in relation to waste?
Absolutely, Senator, happy to. So I think I alluded to earlier statements like we paid thousands to put up Bruce McAvaney in Paris were just wrong. Mr McAvaney wasn't in Paris. Parramatta could talked to at great length. So that was at no impost to taxpayers. We sold a property at Lansley Place in Artarmon. We sold that for the express purpose of rationalising our property footprint and also being able to be in Parramatta in particular, given I think 1 in 10 Australians live in that area. It has an incredible diverse community. We saw that as, you know, an absolute obligation on the ABC really to be in a location like that. So, no, we sold a property that we had in North Sydney. Using the proceeds from that property was how we were able to do the work at Parramatta, develop that site in Parramatta. We also, at the same time, were able to rationalise our footprint in Ultimo, so we were able to do that by actually twofold, by moving certain members of our team to Parramatta, but also it was a project to look at rationalising, I guess, our operation from an efficiency floor plate point of view, allowing for, you know, modern workplaces, for new technology, etc. So we were able to do all of that within, and in fact less than the proceeds we had from the sale of Lansley Place. And then on an ongoing basis in doing that, we've been able to lease out floors in our Ultimo building, which means that there's also no cost to the taxpayer for the leasing of the Parramatta site.
And what about the fact-checking services?
Fact-checking services, Senator, I might pass to Mr Stevens on that one, but suffice to say, we disagree with the comments, but Mr Stevens could provide more detail.
Yeah, I'll have to check the specifics of the claims that Mr Drill made about fact-checking services. The ABC used to have an agreement with RMIT where we ran fact-checking across RMIT and the ABC over a number of years, and we ceased that agreement in the last 12 months, so we no longer have that agreement. That's in part because our focus has pivoted for the team at the ABC end of that to focus on verification, so we've created ABC News Verify. They've generated a lot of original stories, including in the last fortnight alone, looking at various pieces of mis and disinformation. And certainly we see that while it was a valuable service at the time, a lot of teams are now doing that style of explainer-driven and fact-driven journalism anyway.
The Coalition's vowed to crack down on what it considers to be wasteful spending with the appointment of Senator Price as Shadow Minister for Government Efficiency. Are you aware of anything to indicate that the Coalition's focused on waste and efficiency will extend to the ABC?
Senator, I'm not specifically aware of anything at this point in time. I'm not. I apologise if I should be, but I'm not currently aware of anything. I mean, I guess what I would say is we take seriously our statutory obligation to be efficient, to maintain efficiency in our operations, and so I think, you know, we are efficient by nature of our operation.
I'm going to need to rotate the calls.
Can I have one last question? Okay, thank you.
Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about how the ABC is managing the reporting on the invasion in Gaza. Firstly, I'd like to know, does the ABC have a formal policy or guideline regarding the use of the terms Israeli occupation or occupier when referring to Israel's presence in both the West Bank and Gaza?
Senator, I might pass that to Mr Fang.
Yes, thanks, Senator. We issued what we call Middle East guidance to our teams more than 12 months ago, and the guidance is that we refer to the occupied territory.
And has that, so that guidance was issued 12 months ago, has that had to be, have you refined that, have you updated it, have you had, has there been any review of that?
We are always looking to make sure that that guidance is fit for purpose and takes into account changing circumstances or new news and events. So the guidance is regularly updated. I couldn't tell you how many times exactly. I can provide that on notice, but every time we update the guidance, we make sure that we log that for staff and ensure that they're aware of any changes.
And what's the reasoning? I want to understand the understood and defended reasoning of the ABC for having such a policy or a guideline?
Well, we have guidance for a variety of things, everything from our editorial policies through to breaking stories, and to ensure that ABC staff in our coverage are using accurate language, for example, are being accurate in their terminology, are covering stories impartially. So this guidance is no different. We recognise that it is an area of contention, and so the guidance is really to help our journalists, to help our staff to better cover the conflict and the issues that relate to that, and to make sure that we're meeting our obligations for objective and impartial journalism.
And has the ABC conducted any internal reviews or consultations with external experts in relation to the use of terminology and ensuring that it aligns with international legal standards?
Senator, not that I'm aware of. I would say that we consulted internally with our within our editorial policies team and within experts that have covered the conflict. Like any guidance and like any story, we would seek to do research on what are the acceptable terms. For example, what is UN classification, what does the Australian government say, and the like. Mm-hmm. And these things would inform our guidance.
Has there been any guidance given in relation to the International Court of Justice ruling about the illegality of Israel's occupation?
Yes, we have provided guidance on that. I'm happy to provide that to you and to the committee.
That would be helpful.
It's in our guidance. Yep.
That would be helpful. So you can give that to us on notice or
Absolutely.
Table it?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd also like to know whether there's been any guidance on the ICJ's orders made under the Genocide Convention following the application of South Africa against Israel.
Yes, we provided guidance to staff on the ICJ case, on the coverage of that, on where it's at, on the use of the term genocide, and how to report on that case as guidance, and that's also in our Middle East guidance.
Mm-hmm. And has that had to be updated at any point?
The guidance was updated following as the case developed.
Yes, okay. Has there been any guidance given how the terminology used by the ABC or reporting within the ABC in relation to the arrest warrants by the International Criminal Court against the Israeli Prime Minister?
Yes, we've provided guidance on the allegations of war crimes, both what the ICC has said in relation to the Israeli leaders and also the Hamas leaders.
And are these guidelines distributed to staff? I've asked for three different issues here. I guess Now what I want to understand is how are they used in practice?
Yes. So all of that guidance is available internally on our intranet to staff. It's available both in what we call the News Knowledge Hub, which is where that guidance lives, and also on the Editorial Policies Hub, and we direct staff to that. In addition, editorial leaders that engage with their EdPols advisors or are across these matters themselves and are providing advice to their staff have access to that guidance and should be utilising it when working with staff on their stories.
Mm. And has there been any concerns raised by journalists or editorial staff in relation to these particular matters?
I probably wouldn't characterise it that way. I mean, I think that there's been discussion about a variety of issues that have come up across the conflict and about how the ABC will be reporting those. But ultimately, the editorial guidance is agreed upon by myself and working with my colleagues in news, and we issue that as our guidance and what we expect the ABC to do and what our staff should do in the coverage of this conflict.
And is there any policy, or has there been any practice introduced in relation to mentioning or not mentioning the ICJ or ICC positions in relation to Israel?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Senator, other than we have issued guidance around how to accurately cover the ICJ case and the allegations made by the ICC.
So there's no direction or policy that it shouldn't be referenced, it shouldn't be reported on, or that it must be included in either way. It's just if it is to be talked about, this is the guidelines by.
Correct. Where it's relevant, where it is factually important, where it's relevant to a story to discuss the ICJ or the ICC case or the allegations put by the ICC, then it should be included in stories. But we don't provide any other guidance other than that, and for people to utilise our guidance to be accurate around their coverage.
And are you aware of whether these guidelines and the advice that you wish your journalists and editors to use is in line with other public broadcasters such as the BBC?
Some of them would be. There are some differences, I understand, between different parts of guidance around broadcasters around the world. But, our guidance is for Australian journalism, taking into account what's acceptable to our audience and accurate coverage of what's going on in the conflict.
And do you feel, has there been any, I asked whether anyone's raised any concerns about it or there's been any resistance, and you're saying, well, we've put these guidelines together, we've talked through why they exist. Has there been any resistance raised by external bodies in relation to these guidelines?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator, no. There may be. I can find out further, but not that I'm aware of.
Did you want to jump in there?
No, sorry,
okay.
Senator.
Okay.
Last question.
I'm interested, obviously this is a very, the way the invasion in Gaza is talked about, the way the behaviour of and attitude of the Israeli Prime Minister is referenced, is hotly debated, and we are living in a time when Islamophobia and, of course, anti-Semitism is sadly something we see and hear raised and referenced all too much at the moment. I want to understand how, as the public broadcaster, you take a lot of complaints from people, senators, elected officials, members of the public. It is part of the job as being part of the public broadcaster, that we talked about this before, Ms. Klein, being available for criticism and critique. I'm interested as to how you measure this particular issue. I'm wondering whether the ABC has any other metrics apart from how many complaints are received by various voices.
Well,
and how do you manage that? That's what I'm interested in, that particular, because I can see it's a very difficult issue.
So Senator, I'm not sure if I have all the information, but I'll do my best. I mean, firstly, there is a transparent and publicly available complaint process, which details how the audience can contact us and make their feelings heard about ABC content. There is an audiences, what's called the audience support team, which I've used the word triage, but essentially working with the Ombudsman's office, makes a determination about what should be considered a content complaint versus just a general complaint. And content complaints can then be handled by direct response from content making teams, if that is the best way, or if that's the direction from the Ombudsman's office, or they can be then investigated by the Ombudsman's office. The Ombudsman compiles an annual report which provides data on the amount of content complaints, the amount of resolved complaints, any breaches, and also what is the nature of those complaints. So that data enables us to get a sense of what are the complaints about, what are the issues within our content, and helps us to correct them and improve on them. The other measure would be in regards to, for the public to be aware of, is the Ombudsman publishes her reports. We also publish corrections and clarifications and have a corrections and clarifications page, which is another way that corrected errors can be tracked. In regards to the Israel-Gaza conflict, I can say we had one editorial breach finding last year, and there were 1,541 content complaints about that matter.
We'll need to rotate.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Look, I just wanted to raise other concerns about bias at the ABC, and I particularly want to raise concerns about the ABC's repeated use of the Jewish Council of Australia as a spokesperson representing the broader Jewish community. Has there been any review of the ABC's ongoing use of the Jewish Council of Australia, given they, I would put to you, are a fringe group which have only about 900 members, and they're, of course, very, very opposed to the State of Israel?
So, Senator, I will pass to Mr Fang. I think I would just say I wouldn't characterise it as repeated and ongoing, but I will pass to Mr Fang.
Well, just on that point, so I'm talking about interviews on the 5th of May, the 9th of July, the 9th of December and the 10th of December in 2024, and then another interview on the 30th of January 2025. And the one that I think is particularly egregious was an interview on the 5th of May 2024 when Ms Swartz concluded her time on the air by saying, "We need to put in place measures that we would put in place against any pariah state that is committing these atrocities, and that includes sanctions, cutting military and diplomatic ties, and showing that there is a real cost to committing these types of war crimes." The interviewer then said, "Sarah, it's great talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on Weekend Breakfast." And that particular interview is still available on the ABC's YouTube channel, and that's had 2.3 million, and that has 2.3 million subscribers.
Thank you, Senator. The exact reference is helpful, so I'll pass to Mr Fang, who I'm sure will know.
Thanks, Senator. I'd have to go back and have a look at the 5th of May interview specifically, but I can tell you that my knowledge is that we have interviewed Sarah Schwartz from the Jewish Council of Australia 5 times in the past 12 months, or since April 2024. You asked if there's been any review, I believe, is that correct?
That's right.
There has not. There has been a complaint. There have been a number of complaints about the Jewish Council of Australia's appearance on the ABC, and one of them was investigated by the Ombudsman and found not to be a breach. I think that that Sarah Schwartz and the Jewish Council represent, one perspective, and where they're appropriate, we have interviewed members of that group. There are about 1,000 people, as you point out. I think you said 900. I think it's about 1,000 people. And they are there. It is a relevant perspective depending on the story. They are also speak about anti-Semitism, which is an important matter to discuss. But we obviously recognise proportionality in the sense that for matters that broadly affect the Jewish community, we go to spokespeople that are more widely representative. I can go through a whole list of people that we have interviewed if you like, or else I can provide that to you on notice.
I'm happy to take that on notice, but I'm particularly concerned because Ms Swartz has been interviewed in a number of one-on-one interviews, not just news grabs, and as I mentioned before, with comments such as making very, very controversial allegations against the State of Israel, which were not countered by your ABC interviewer, and those comments have been allowed to stand, and this has deeply upset many, many Jewish Australians, including all of the mainstream Jewish organisations.
I suppose what I would say, Senator, is that our obligation is to present a diversity of perspectives. The JCA, or Jewish Council, represents a particular perspective in the community. We have put that to air a number of times, 5 times I believe over the past 12 months, but it is in amongst a wide variety of interviews of spokespeople and representatives of the wider Jewish community.
Well, I would welcome the evidence to support that, because in terms of these breakfast program interviews and the like, what is the evidence that you've given a similar platform for those sorts of long-form running interviews to other groups?
Well, happy to go through that. I mean, I'll take, if I may, what was one of the latest examples, which was on News Breakfast a couple of weeks ago. So on the day that we interviewed Sarah Schwartz, we also interviewed an extremism expert from Deakin University. We interviewed James Patterson, the Shadow Home Affairs Minister. We interviewed Benjamin Klein from the Adas Israel Synagogue. We interviewed, across this period, Alex Rivkin. We've interviewed Rabbi Benjamin Elton from the Great Synagogue Sydney, Michelle Goldman from the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies, and a whole collection of other spokespeople and people that are representative of the Jewish community.
I'm not talking about news grabs. I'm actually talking about long-form interviews where the perspectives of the Jewish Council of Australia have been elevated, and at no point in time has the ABC sought to explain that this is not a representative group of the Jewish community at large when you consider other representative organisations. And I'm raising these very legitimate concerns, and I would put it to you that I'm concerned that you don't see any reason to review these sorts of decisions.
So, Senator, I suppose what I'm saying is that we definitely take on board the feedback and from the community, but I'm just providing you with the data about the number of times that we have interviewed that group, and it's my view that we have also interviewed widely other representatives of the wider Jewish community, and I can go away and provide you on notice when we have done that in significant long interviews. Happy to take that on notice.
Thank you. I would appreciate it, including if you could please provide the time that each person was given as a representative of the Jewish community in the last 12 months. The broadcast.
We can look at that. We can absolutely look at that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to go back to the Heston Russell case and ask, in terms of the recommendations made by Mr Sunderland, has there been any implementation of those recommendations?
Senator, I will again pass to Mr Fang to talk through the recommendations.
Yes, thank you. So, Senator, Thank you. I'll just pull up the appropriate bits of information for you. So Mr Sunderland made Mr Sunderland made 7 recommendations, which we have taken on board fully. So the first recommendation is about editorial policies and guidance should be reviewed to ensure that the importance of maintaining the integrity of crucial source material is maintained, particularly in investigative stories. So that falls under my remit as the editorial director, and a review of that guidance has begun, and we will also talk to ABC staff about that in order to make sure that the guidance meets Mr Sunderland's recommendations and also meets audience expectations. The second recommendation is that the training should be reviewed, in particular for non-editorial staff working in investigative areas, to ensure everyone is aware of key editorial principles, including the need to maintain the integrity of source material. So that is already underway, and there is mandatory editorial policy training for ABC content makers, and so working with News, we are adding the appropriate non-editorial staff to that list of mandatory editorial policy training. The third recommendation is that editing practices should be reviewed to ensure there is regular, timely and detailed face-to-face contact between editors, reporters and researchers during the editing process. And then recommendation 4 is when multi-platform stories are being prepared, consistent and equal scrutiny should be applied to all elements of the story across all platforms. So this is an action item that has begun in the news division. So a review of all editing practices in all news teams is underway, focusing on identification of specific risk factors by reporters and producers at the scripting and production phase. Workshops are also workshops and training. My apologies. There's also as part of that recommendation, a response with all teams, discussing how to implement this requirement and looking at workflows, for example. And then finally, applying this requirement as set out by Mr Sunderland to all story elements for all platforms. As you would imagine, in a complex media environment that we have today, we make stories that go across multiple platforms at multiple times. So we're taking on board Mr Sunderland's recommendation about that. Recommendation 5 is that News should review the guidance note on interviews and discuss. So this is also within my remit now as editorial director, and I'm looking at the guidance note around interviews and looking to see where the guidance requires some additional information for staff to meet Mr Sunderland's recommendation around accuracy as it relates to interviews. And the final 2 recommendations have been already discussed by the acting MD, but I'll read them out for you. So recommendation 6...
Sorry, just in terms of, just to cut to the chase because we haven't got much time. So that's in the effective communication between News and Legal?
That's correct. So recommendation 6 and 7 are about communication with News and Legal, and then steps to ensure adequate staff and resources are available to deal with complex and demanding legal matters. And my understanding is that there's also already a review of ABC Legal underway to ensure we appropriately meet those recommendations.
And what can you just describe the nature of that review? Is that review examining the operations of ABC Legal?
I am sorry, Senator, I don't have that information. It's not in my area. I can take that on notice, or else somebody else might have that information.
Can you add anything in relation to that review, Ms Klein?
So it is, yes, looking at the processes within the legal department and the resources allocated to matters of this magnitude is the essence of it.
And what's the outcome in that review? What's the nature of that review and how long will it take?
We'll rotate after this answer.
Sure. Senator, I'll have to take on notice the exact time taken to do the review.
Just in relation to the question.
Senator Henderson, we have to rotate.
Oh, sure, okay, Chair, thanks.
Thank you. Senator Rennick.
Hi guys, how are you going? Good? Okay, I just want to raise a couple of issues. There was an article released back in August 21 that basically was a fact check on, so you did an ABC fact check, I think at the time with RMIT, and you raised the issue of, or it was raised that the claim by Alan Haitian that a bloke by the name of Roberto Garin died from the vaccine was misinformation. Now, it turns out that the autopsy report confirmed that he did indeed die from the vaccine. He died in front of his wife and his daughter, I think it was one of his children, when the other child walked in. Now, this occurred 7 days after the vaccine. The person that, the coroner who performed the autopsy confirmed it was indeed from the vaccine. Are you willing to withdraw the statement that this was actually misrepresentation and apologise to Kirsty Garron?
Senator, I apologise. I am not familiar with what the matter you're referring to. I'm not sure, Mr. Stevens, if you're familiar.
Happy to take that on notice. Did you say it's from 2021?
Yep, August 2021.
August
and clearly, you know, this fact check did not contact the person involved, because had they contacted the person involved, they would have had this information and not made a statement in the first place.
Senator, could I ask, are you able to provide us with the exact detail on that so that we can look into it?
I'll put it on notice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you did, because it was extremely traumatic. And I think it's important to note that the TGA has acknowledged that even though they receive autopsy reports that acknowledge people were killed, where the coroner has said that the vaccine caused their death, that the TGA didn't actually report that as a reported death from the vaccine. And that's, you know, so you can't rely on everything the TGA tells you, I guess is the point. And had your fact checker done their work, they would have known that. The second question I've got is, back in 2019, Four Corners did a piece about Donald Trump, whereby it quoted a lot of the Russian collusion stories that Donald Trump was colluding with Russia, all of this information, and somehow that, you know, Donald Trump was receiving money from Russia. All of this these so-called allegations have been proven to be false and deliberate misinformation spread by intelligence agencies for political purposes. But however, that Four Corners program is still up on your website, and given that we now know that it's false information, can you please explain why it's still on the website?
Again, sorry, Senator, I'm not personally familiar with the story, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, 2019 is obviously some time ago, but I think you're referring to the multi-part program by Sarah Ferguson.
Yep,
and
follow the money. Yep.
What I would say, not having had the chance to look back over the story recently, is that Sarah's one of the most esteemed journalists in the country, and the materials that they were relying on for those programs were the best available information at the time, and they reported it accurately.
Well, I haven't, because it's been proven to be false.
The information that was available to them at the time was reported accurately, and Sarah is one of Australia's most respected journalists with the utmost integrity. So we'll have a good look at your question and we'll take that on notice.
Okay, and final question, thanks, Chair. So Sarah's still on the 7:30 report. She's the lead presenter, I'm led to believe. I've asked a number of times for interviews with 7:30 report, and I know other independent senators have gotten interviews with the 7:30 report, and I haven't yet to get one. And I'm just curious to know why there's bias in the fact that ABC seem to want to present other independent politicians from the left side of politics but not the right side of politics.
So, with respect, Senator, I contest the assertion that the program only requests or speaks to people from one side of politics. I can say with confidence that's not the case. Sorry, I'm responding to Senator Rennick. And in regards to specific requests you've made for that program to interview, I'm not privy to those, but I'm happy to have a look at that. The program makes independent decisions about who they approach to interview, obviously, and the individuals obviously have to be relevant to the public discussion that is of news that day or week.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So I'll give you the example of Senator Payman. When she announced her new party, she got a gig on the 7:30 report that night. Nothing against Senator Payman, it's nothing personal or anything like that. But my question is, I also approached the 7:30 report immediately after that and said, can I also get an opportunity to promote people first, which is effectively what the 7:30 report was doing, and that was 4 months ago, and I still haven't got a response.
So, Senator, the 7:30 program and the ABC generally is not in the business of promoting political parties like yours. It's in the business of questioning and asking.
Yep, absolutely.
And secondly, I don't think anyone would question that Senator Payman's decisions over the course of that fortnight were massively relevant to the news agenda that week and very much in the public interest.
But that, okay, well... Okay,
Not
that's
radical
fine.
enough.
But I'm just curious because, I mean, you've just said, and I'll admit we're not that, big either, but the point is it was a clear example of how one person got a gig and another person didn't.
I think they're different circumstances with respect as to the
Both
considerations.
two new parties started around the same time.
I think it's a inaccurate correlation to make that. The correlation would be accurate if you were a member of the party room of, say, one of the two major political parties, and there was a great deal of questioning around your voting motivations that week with a key policy issue, to the extent that it went against the party room and then subsequently left the party. I'm not aware that you've been through a similar journey yourself in that respect.
Well, you must have your head in the sand for the last 3 years. I mean, I withheld my vote from the Liberal Party over the vaccine mandates and injuries.
I appreciate that you're upset that they haven't interviewed on the telly.
No, I'm not upset. It's totally what I expect.
I will say that, I'm not sure that continuing on, I think Mr Stevens has quite clearly said that it's a matter of public interest as they view it, rather than a scent of bias.
Well, I'd just like to correct for the record, Chair, I'm not upset. I didn't expect to get an interview with the ABC. I just want to highlight the hypocrisy of the ABC and how impartial you are, or lack of impartiality, how you interview certain people but not other people.
Understood,
So I'll leave that as a
and
comment.
we'll chat the program about it, and I can confirm Sarah still anchors the program. She's doing a terrific job.
Yeah, and this Russian collusion one's a classic example. You've still got it up there, you haven't corrected it. Same for the poor woman who had a husband die in front of her and you've gaslighted her. So, you need to look at the way you report your news. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rennick.
Can I just get an undertaking that I will never feature on 7:30 reports?
I can't guarantee that, Senator Cadet.
Not everyone's clamouring for the same limelight, right? Thank you. Senator Faruqi, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Last Senate estimates, we had a discussion about internal editorial guidance, which I think Senator Hanson-Young has asked questions on as well. And I guess, in my opinion, ABC's Israel-Palestine coverage is heavily weighted towards covering up Israel's culpability in genocide. But you have said that you have updated the guidance from last time to now. Last time, the guidance, I think, was to not use the word genocide. Since that time, Amnesty International has concluded that there is sufficient evidence to believe that Israel's conduct in Gaza following 7th October 2023 amounts to genocide, and they have joined others, including United Nations and Human Rights Watch, who have a similar opinion. So you did say that your guidance had changed in terms of genocide, and I just want to know if ABC journalists are now allowed to use genocide in relation to Israel's massacre of Palestinians in Gaza, or are you still insisting on calling it a conflict?
Sorry, Senator, I will just... You've made a bunch of different assertions there, so I'll just deal with the facts from the ABC perspective. If you took from my answer before to your colleague that we have updated the guidance about genocide since the last time I was here, that's not correct.
Okay.
I was making a general comment that we are always updating our guidance depending on facts, news on the ground, events, new things that come up. I don't believe we've updated anything to do with our guidance regarding genocide since we were last here. Happy to provide all of the, as I said to your colleague, happy to provide the Middle East guidance on notice for you. I don't believe we've actually changed our guidance on genocide, nor have we ever said that the term genocide cannot be used. What we've put in our guidance to staff is that it's a highly contentious matter, and that by and large, or in most occasions, that you would, if you are reporting on allegations of genocide, you need to provide the other perspective on this issue. There are exceptions to that, clearly, if you are talking to somebody, or if you are putting a live interview for it to air where somebody's experienced been involved in a family member's died or something like that. We don't expect you to be questioning their claim at the time. But if we are doing anything where there is the contentious allegation of genocide is made, our guidance is that you need to include Israel's denial of that. And that has been our guidance from the beginning.
So have ABC journalists used the term genocide, do you know, in their reporting?
Absolutely.
They have?
Yes.
Okay. I think it was Ms. Klein, I think you said earlier that 1.1 million has been spent on Antoinette Lattouf's case by the ABC on external fees to date.
Correct, yes.
Does the ABC regret not apologising to Antoinette Lattouf and paying her $85,000 and letting her finish her 2 shifts on air as she asked in an open letter offer in July last year, given that now you have spent $1.1 million already and probably internally a lot more?
So, Senator, it's very important for me to state the ABC maintains that it did not terminate Ms. Lattouf's 1-week casual contract unlawfully. If you're asking me, would the ABC have preferred not to spend $1.1 million? The answer to that is yes. That's why we have attempted to settle the matter on a number of occasions. I think, as you reference, there has been information put on the public record. I think that includes things like reinstatement. It included a range of other requests. Financial compensation has only been one element of those requests, which has resulted in an unfortunate circumstance where we have not been able to settle the matter.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Fang, you said earlier in response to Senator Hanson-Young's questions that there was one editorial breach finding last year in regards to Israel-Gaza. Could you tell us what that breach was?
Yes, we spoke about this at the last Senate estimates, so I would have to go back and to make sure I'm detailing it correctly, but it was in relation to our coverage of the rally post the death of the Lebanese leader, Hassan Nasrallah.
Okay. Just a couple more quick questions from me. I'm not sure if we have the number of complaints that the ABC received about Antoinette Lattouf, or do you have the number of complaints that were received?
Senator, not with me. I don't, and no, I don't believe we've provided that on notice before.
Could you take that on notice?
Certainly.
Did any of the complaints relate to her actual on-air conduct?
Senator, I'm sorry, I do not have the detail of complaints.
Could you provide that?
Certainly.
Could I just
Yes.
do a follow-up to that? Then we're going to have to... I think it'd be helpful to know what the official complaints were through the normal, public complaint process, but also when complaints were made to members of the board, which we know occurred, where did they go? Were they logged as part of the process, or were they kept separately?
We'll take all of that on notice, Senator.
Thank you.
And could you also take on notice how many complaints the ABC has received about journalists perceived to have a pro-Israel bias in their reporting?
We can take that on notice, yes.
And have any journalists had their employment terminated?
Senator
on
Fruki.
those? Just one quick one, and then I'm done.
Senator Fruki, there's a whole
Okay,
line
I'll
of
put it on
people who
notice.
wish to
I will
ask
put it on
questions.
notice, Chair.
The committee had determined to stick to time. You can absolutely put further questions on notice. We have one final question from Senator Billick and one final from Senator Cadell.
Thank you. Just returning to the questions I was asking earlier regarding potential funding cuts. We all know we're not going to be told until after the elections, if the opposition win government, that we're not going to be told what's going to be cut. So I'm quite concerned, because their love for the ABC isn't really, out there in bold letters. And I heard
But their hatred for the ABC...
I heard an interview on the ABC radio recently with Shadow Minister Melissa McIntosh, and she was asked if she would rule out privatising the ABC, and she didn't rule this out. as also she's the Shadow Minister for Western Sydney, so I'm interested to know also, have you got concerns about the fact she didn't rule that issue out? And also, at the recent opening of the new Parramatta studios, was the Shadow Minister invited?
So, Senator, to answer your first question, I have a strong belief in the importance of the ABC and the importance of the ABC for democracy, and I trust that is a belief widely shared. To answer your second question around the Shadow Minister, no, I don't believe the Shadow Minister herself was able to attend the event.
Invited?
But certainly, my understanding is the Shadow Minister was invited. She was not personally able to attend, but she did send representatives to the event.
So the PM and the
Senator Bullock,
Minister for Communications was there, but I don't think either of...
Senator Bullock, we're going to have to move on.
Can I just finish this question?
You can put further questions on notice.
I'll do that.
I'm trying to take us to time.
All right.
I just want to raise a point of order, Chair, in relation to Senator Bullock's questioning of the witness. I'm just concerned that she's trying to misrepresent the position of the Coalition. The Coalition has not made no statement whatsoever in relation to privatising the ABC. It's scurrilous. And it
Senator
just goes to show that the government
Senator
is
Henderson, you do not have the call. Senator Bullock, you do not have the call either. The call... No. Okay, sorry, Senator Cadell. We will suspend. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming along. I really appreciate it. I would like to just put on the record our appreciation, mine anyway, for Mr David Anderson. I know he's not able to be here today, but he has given over 35 years of service to the ABC, has been in front of this committee many times, and I just wanted to wish him well for his future endeavours and just wanted that on the record. Thank you all very much for coming along.
Can I just also endorse your comments on behalf of the opposition? We too would like to pay tribute to Mr Anderson for 35 years of service, a very long stint. We worked alongside each other in Elstonwick many years ago, so I've known Mr Anderson for a very long time, and I really appreciate the way that he has undertaken his responsibilities through the good, the bad and the ugly in Senate estimates, and we wish him all the best.
Yes, always presented himself exceptionally well. Thank you so much for your time today. We do really appreciate it. We will now suspend and we will return at 4 p.m.